Hey y'all, welcome back to Flick Connection, where in less time than you normally spend scrolling for something to watch every night, I'm going to tell you about the best sci-fi movies currently included with Netflix. That's right, we've got a long list of sci-fi movies, mostly movies. There's a couple little surprises hidden on this list. Thanks to Keeps for sponsoring this video. We'll talk more about them in a bit, but first I want to talk about my last pick on this list, which is one of the weirdest ones, Vivarium. Now this stars Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots, and that's almost it, and it is, like I said, a wild one. They both go to view this model home in a new housing development, and shortly after viewing the house with a weird real estate agent, they realize they can't get out of this housing development. And you literally spend the entire movie trapped in this empty suburban landscape with the two of them as they try to figure out how to escape this trap that they found themselves in. Not only is this one weird, but there are some nerve-grinding elements that are really not going to be suitable for some viewers. They're just not going to be able to handle some of the sounds one of the characters makes in this movie. But if you typically find really strange things interesting, then Vivarium actually has quite a bit to offer. Now, my next pick stars Colin Farrell and a fairly young cast, and this movie is targeted at a younger audience, which is why it's not a strong recommendation for me. But in Voyagers, you're actually on this interstellar spacecraft, mostly populated with young adults. Colin Farrell seems to be kind of the leader, or at least the commander of this group, and they're actually running some experiments on them through this long voyage. It deals with some pretty heavy coming-of-age stuff. I almost hesitate to say coming-of-age because it does delve into more adult themes, but it's a PG-13 movie, and like I said, it is aimed at young adults. My next one I feel like is also kind of aimed at a young adult audience, but it does offer some dazzling visuals with mortal engines. Now, on a recent video, I did talk about how this one was a bit of a disappointment. It's just a little loose and messy. However, the world building is pretty solid with mortal engines. This is based on a book by the same name, and it does turn into this sort of overblown modern-day sci-fi action-adventure thing where the effects are not really that interesting. It's mostly just CGI, but they also take priority over all of the storytelling, and so this kind of ends up being a ham-fisted story. But if you're interested in the visuals of these gigantic moving cities that can actually swallow one another up, then Mortal Engines is pretty cool. It just, I don't know, it kind of missed the mark, which is also why it's further back on this list. Now, I could say a lot of the same things about my next pick, except that I think Cowboys and Aliens has a bit more going for it, particularly in the first half. This is actually directed by Jon Favreau and is one of his more underrated movies. I can see where audiences were not in love with this movie, particularly with where it ends up. The creature design isn't that inspired in my opinion, but it starts with a really mysterious opening. Daniel Craig is excellent in the movie, but you've also got Harrison Ford playing a bad guy, which he doesn't do very often. Paul Dano's good in this movie. Sam Rockwell, and it actually makes out for kind of a cool western with a little bit of a sci-fi edge. And then when you get about halfway through it, the alien stuff really picks up, and it is a fun popcorn movie. It's just not as rewatchable as that first half initially led me to believe. All right, now my next pick is a sequel, and in terms of a sequel, it is nowhere near the movie of the original. But if you can just forget that it is a sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey, then 2010, The Year We Make Contact, is actually a pretty solid sci-fi flick. Now, not only does this have a decent production value, but it also dabbles with some really interesting themes. And the reason I say you should forget that it's a sequel to 2001 is because Stanley Kubrick had nothing to do with this movie. He didn't write it, he obviously didn't direct it, but it does revolve around a joint USA-Soviet expedition that actually is sent out to Jupiter to learn what happened to the Discovery in 2001, as well as the HAL computer. Again, the movie's got a solid look to it, high-end production value. It just in no way, shape, or form looks or even feels like Stanley Kubrick's work. Now for something that's based in science fact, not science fiction, I want to share with you how I've been keeping my hair so sharp looking the past few years with today's sponsor, Keeps. Male pattern baldness is actually a genetic condition that affects 2 out of every 3 guys by the time they're age 35. But you can get professional care for hair loss from the comfort of your own home without ever visiting a doctor or pharmacy. Personally, I started going gray at a very young age, and I at least wanted to make sure that my gray hair looked full and healthy, so I consulted Keeps. And it's super convenient. You just complete a simple online consultation so you get matched with a provider that's going to tailor a treatment plan specifically for you. Keeps actually offers both of the FDA-approved treatments for hair loss and a 2-in-1 treatment plan that combines both options. And they're treatments that are clinically proven to work, whether you're looking to prevent hair loss, stimulate hair growth, or just take better care of the hair you have. Keeps has you covered. And most Keeps men notice results after about 6 months of starting their treatment. I also love their shampoo and conditioner. My hair always looks thicker and fuller immediately after use. Individual results may vary, but right now my viewers can use my link in the video description or just go to keeps.com/flickconnection to redeem a special offer and take that initial consultation. And don't worry if you want to keep Keeps a secret. They deliver treatments directly to your door in discreet, non-branded packaging. So again, use my link in the description or just go to keeps.com/flickconnection to get that special offer and start that consultation. But let's jump back into some science fiction. Now, I did say I had a couple of surprises on this list, meaning I've got 2 things on here that are not movies, but I still think movie lovers will enjoy them. Longtime subscribers know I occasionally recommend anime, typically movies that I think can reach a broader audience, meaning if you don't typically watch anime, I'll recommend things that you might really enjoy. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is a Netflix limited series. I believe there's only about 8 episodes, and this is a spin-off of kind of an ill-fated video game titled Cyberpunk. I actually loved the video game, but when it was released, it was just one of the buggiest experiences anyone ever had, meaning it was a big, expensive game that kind of flopped, and this series came out on Netflix around the same time, and so it was kind of forgotten about. However, it's an incredible cyberpunk-based anime show. The color palette on it really appeals to me in particular, and I honestly wish they had carried out more of it. It's highly rated. It did develop a little bit of a fan base, but kind of got buried, 1, because it's on Netflix, and 2, because of the kind of failures of the launch of that video game. I think people kind of lost interest. If you're just into cyberpunk stuff at all, like you really love Blade Runner, then there's a lot to enjoy with Cyberpunk Edgerunners. All right, next up, we've got one that's just kind of fun. It's silly. It's not a smart sci-fi movie, but it does make for a fun alien invasion flick. Battleship. Now, yeah, it's another movie based off of toys like G.I. Joe or Transformers. In fact, Battleship, I think, has a lot in common with the Transformers movies, not just because some of the graphics are similar, but Battleship, even though it was directed by Peter Berg, it looks and feels like a big budget Michael Bay movie. There's a lot of really slick visuals in this one as well, but the movie never takes itself too seriously. There are some tense moments, but it's all done in a spirit of fun. And to me, this just felt like a modern day version of like a classic alien invasion movie you'd go see at the drive-in or something like that, just done with modern computer graphics. Again, fun stuff that you don't have to take seriously whatsoever. But another big budget blockbuster that you can take a little bit more seriously is actually Godzilla from 2014. In fact, this is the first, and I would even say the most serious movie in the current series that Warner Brothers is releasing. These movies have gotten a little bit more fun and silly, kind of like a Fast and the Furious with big monsters, but this first one is a little more grounded, a little more intense, and I think pairs up with the Monarch series that they put on Apple TV, kind of the best. This one actually plays out much more like a disaster movie than this fun action-adventure sci-fi thing that these have turned into more recently. Okay, now for one that is not going to be for everybody. In fact, my next pick is going to be for the smallest amount of you watching, but I still wanted to talk about Melancholia. This is actually from director Lars von Trier. If you've never seen any of his movies, then honestly, Melancholia is not going to be the place to start. I will say the opening, 8 minutes of the movie, have visuals in it that are every bit as stunning as anything in Dune. But then it turns into a very slow-paced drama about depression. That is what this movie's about, but it does involve this gigantic planet named Melancholia that is on a collision course with Earth. Now, it stands as sort of the metaphor or allegory for this depression that you can't escape. That said, people who love slow-paced art films with a lot to say and a lot to think about should really enjoy this one, particularly if you liked his other films. This one kind of fits in line with Antichrist without being nearly as upsetting or off-putting as that movie would become. It's also really effective at sharing what depression is kind of like or how it feels, how you can't communicate your dread and despair to other people. So the sci-fi element, while it's all metaphorical, essentially, meaning it doesn't really feel like a sci-fi movie, it does have a really unique purpose in this movie that I know will make some of you think on it for days. And then other folks, if the idea of a slow-paced art film about depression does not interest you, just trust me, steer clear of this one. But we'll go from that one that's not really for everybody to a cult classic starring Emilio Estevez that fans of this channel should definitely check out. By the way, fans of the channel, yes, you eyes did not deceive you. There's new shirts available. I've actually got 4 brand new designs over at darrenvandam.com/shop, so go check those out when you get a chance. But Repo Man is a really funky movie. This stars Emilio Estevez as a repo man. He actually gets a job reclaiming cars, and most of the movie does not have much of a sci-fi slant, but he ends up pursuing a car with a high bounty on it that has something mysterious in the trunk. So there is a science fiction element that is got a very unique tone to it. And the movie itself does as well. It doesn't really exist in our world. When they're in the grocery store, everything has really plain labels on it. There's a lot of thought that went into this movie, and then Emilio Estevez is great in it. It's got some really funky elements and will appeal to people who love punk. If you grew up listening to punk and you've somehow never seen Repo Man, trust me, make this the first thing you watch off of this list. Next up, I'm technically recommending 2 movies, even though I strongly recommend the first over the sequel to Split and Glass. Split being just an incredible thriller. It stars Anya Taylor-Joy. She's amazing in the movie, but James McAvoy really carries this thing. He's got a split personality. That's obviously where the title comes from, but he plays each of these characters so well, and they're all so different. Some are insanely menacing, some are very manipulative, some have a very low IQ, and one is a total monster. If you don't know, this is the movie that reinvigorated M. Night Shyamalan's career. He had created turd after turd after turd, and then magically came back with this movie, and they literally did not even promote this. They did not market it as a M. Night Shyamalan movie. It wasn't until the sequel came out that they kind of started putting his name back on things, and I don't think Glass is a bad movie. It's got some interesting elements, it's got some good performances from some top-tier actors, but given the setup that we're given in Unbreakable and in Split, I just feel like Glass started off in the complete wrong direction. It didn't make good use or exploit any of the potential that both of those prior movies had set up, and ends up just being kind of an okay movie, especially if you like the people involved. But for me, how much I loved Unbreakable and really enjoyed Split, Glass just didn't deliver much for me. All right, some of you are going to think this is blasphemy, my next pick, but just hang with me for a minute. I'm going to try to explain why I've ranked the Total Recall remake so high.
This is gonna be hard for you to believe. Whatever you think, you remember. It's not real.
Now, I'm a big fan of the original, love Schwarzenegger, and just think that that movie is incredible in so many ways, not just the effects, but it's so epic. There's so many action sequences and great scenes in the original Total Recall. The new one, I don't think will hold up nearly as well as the original, but if you take it away from the original and just look at it as a Colin Farrell sci-fi movie with Kate Beckinsale, who's not only smoking hot, but has a couple of great fight sequences in the movie. In fact, she's smoking hot just for how mean she is in this movie, but then you've also got Jessica Biel, one of her last big, great movies that she's in. Bryan Cranston. You know, they don't even go to Mars in this one. So to me, this is like, it doesn't even feel like Total Recall. Yes, plot-wise, they start off in a similar place, but it doesn't go to the same place, and really, it's kind of a surprise of a cyberpunk flick, especially for the time that it came out. Similar to 2010, it just doesn't look or feel like its predecessor, which I know disappointed a lot of people. But in terms of like Kate Beckinsale action movies, she's done some good ones. I think this is my favorite. Okay, on my last video, my top movie that I talked about was Nicolas Cage's Mandy. Not that that's a new movie, but it was just free on some streaming services, so I wanted to talk about it. The director of Mandy, Panos Cosmatos, directed one episode of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, which came out 2 Halloweens ago. His episode, though, The Viewing, is easily my favorite. I've watched it a few times now. Now, I will warn you, this is slow-paced. I do think you need to be interested in Panos Cosmatos, meaning Mandy and his other film, Beyond the Black Rainbow, to really enjoy this one. It is a slow conversation piece, but it's a slow conversation piece with some very interesting actors. Casting choices were just beyond interesting on this one, with sci-fi legend Peter Weller at the center. Now, again, you have to be very patient, but if you're into Panos Cosmatos and his style, this short film basically has really cool original music to it, an amazing vibe. It goes into some dark territories, but you do have to wait. You have to wait for the end. Again, I know I'm raving about it, but I'm really only recommending this for people who love Mandy or Beyond the Black Rainbow. I think you're going to dig this one, but again, just strap in for like a 45-50 minute ride, and it takes a while for this one to really pick up. And then I feel like I need to include Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's available on Netflix. I have talked about it a few times. It got nominated for a ton of awards. I'm honestly shocked that this won Best Picture, because it is a bonkers movie in every possible sense of the word. But as bonkers as it is, it actually conveys a really heartfelt story about family and the state of the world today, and how it can kind of confuse your brain and make you feel like shit about yourself. Like, they captured that with this crazy, like, Rick and Morty style movie, and I think it's really brilliant the way that they pulled that off. And it comes from a couple of places. The performances, I mean, Short Round from Indiana Jones made an insane comeback with this movie. He is amazing in this movie. I loved his performance. And let's not forget about Jamie Lee Curtis. I mean, my God. But the movie is exhausting. It can wear you out a bit. I just appreciate it and rank it so highly because of how effective it is at conveying so many, like, really complex feelings. But we're nearing the top of the list, and my number 3 pick is one that's potentially appropriate for the whole family, but still just a great one to watch as adults, Ender's Game.
They know our strategies. They've learned our weaknesses. And the alien attack nearly destroyed us.
Now, this one is rated PG-13, but it does have some frightening elements. My children are 8 and 6, and because I like it when they sleep at night, I'm not going to show them this movie, but it's based on a book by the same name. My wife actually read the book years before the movie came out, and she thoroughly enjoyed the movie. But this movie takes place in the future where humanity is trying to fight this unstoppable alien force, and they're actually using young children because there's something about the way that their brains have yet to develop all the way where they're more apt to use these programs and are more capable of fighting off these aliens. So it's an interesting premise, and in the movie delivers. Not only is Harrison Ford great in this one as well, but Ben Kingsley's really cool with a bunch of face tattoos. And the young actor, Asa Butterfield, you've seen him in a bunch of stuff. I mean, for such a young kid, he does a great job carrying a big budget sci-fi movie like this. And this one's not like Battleship. It's not one where you turn your brain off. It actually has a little bit of something to say and kind of some interesting twists and turns in it as well. This is a much more thought-provoking movie than you might expect based on, just some of the visuals here. My number 2 pick is the entire Matrix trilogy. I love these movies. I even enjoy the second and third. Not as much as the first. The first movie just is one of the most rewatchable things I've ever seen, or at least it used to be. I practically burned a hole in the DVD when I was in high school. I loved it that much, and I still do to this day. It's got so many cool scenes in it, and is so unique unto itself. I know it borrows from a lot of things, but it has its own unique style that, yes, they replicated in the other ones and have done in other movies since, but my goodness, that first Matrix is just such a enjoyable, rewatchable science fiction movie. If you feel like you don't want to rewatch it, trust me, put it like the first 5 minutes will get you sucked into this movie again. And then I just love some of the action in the second one. And honestly, even though I don't love the third, I did like where they went with Neo's character. There's a lot of really deep elements to the arc of his character that develop in that third movie. And yes, they're battling the drones more and they're in the Matrix less, but it's still such an epic conclusion to that movie. It's been a while since I've watched all 3. Who knows, maybe I'll get a wild hair and do that this month. And then believe it or not, I actually put Looper as my number 1 pick, meaning I even put this one above The Matrix, which was a hard call to make, but I didn't feel good putting the Matrix trilogy at number 1. Looper has so many interesting elements to it that honestly I think just got criminally overlooked.
Time travel has not yet been invented, but 30 years from now, it will have been.
The biggest one being the most obvious one. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, not only is he good in the movie, but the face makeup they gave him to look like a young Bruce Willis, I thought was brilliant.
Do you know what's gonna happen? You done all this already? As me?
I don't want to talk about time travel.
We both know how this has to go down. So why don't you do what old men do and die?
It's a simple little trick. I mean, he doesn't even look like Bruce Willis looked when he was young, but they still look like they could be the same person. And the fact that they are the same person from 2 different times, kind of sitting across the table from each other talking, was such an interesting take on the time travel genre. In fact, the movie itself is a very interesting take on time travel, but it also dabbles with a lot of other science fiction themes. Not only are those 2 guys great in it, in fact, I would consider this to be like Bruce Willis's last really great movie. Emily Blunt is fantastic as well. She kind of shows up mid-movie, but ends up being a very pivotal character. And really, the whole cast was fantastic. The movie's full of surprises, and has like old school Twilight Zone elements in its themes. Meaning I love the setup, I love the look of it, I love the little clever thing with the makeup. There's just a lot to enjoy with this movie that's every bit as good as like a Christopher Nolan movie, in my opinion. But that is the full list. If you're wondering why some of your favorite movies didn't make the list, maybe movies like Spectral, the Netflix original movie, it's only because I've talked about them in recent sci-fi lists. I'll actually link to my more recent sci-fi list down in the video description if you want even more recommendations on Netflix. I also put the link for that special Keeps promotion down in the video description as well, so thanks to them for sponsoring another video. But I will keep making these episodes as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this sci-fi video, and you will see me on the next one.